everyone. I had said the other day that I was going to talk about the tree walk that I had the other day, and just to give you some background, it was with a guy that he and his wife run an outdoor school in the mountains, and they have like apprenticeships for more intensive kind of study, even things like fire starting and fire making and basket weaving and things like that. Those aren't cheaps, but this was just a little $15 kind of donation for this, and it was really neat. We went to a park that's a little bit north of here. It's still in town. It's actually not far from where the Botanical Gardens is. And it did have some really impressive trees, and I mean there are impressive trees around here everywhere, but a couple that I saw right when I got out of the car, just these massive, beautiful trees. So he started out, he actually did like a little prayer at the beginning, and he carries around tobacco that he would offer to the trees, and he, basically, what do you call it, bow to the directions and that sort of thing. And he started by telling us that trees' brains are in their root system. That's where their head is. The top, what we see, is actually their reproductive system. It is their genitalia. And that trees communicate with one another through the soil, through mycelium. And I thought that's like really fascinating. It makes me look at my yard completely differently, and it makes me feel sad about taking out my pines out front, although I needed to do it, because it's like the other trees must have gone, oh, where did our friends go? But he said that if a tree becomes diseased, if it's like in a woods, and a tree becomes diseased, it will drop its defensive, and those trees right near it will drop their defenses, but all the trees in a bigger circle around them will increase their defenses. In other words, to contain the disease, which I thought was like really fascinating. And then he talked about various kinds of trees. We were talking about the pines, which I knew were loblollies. And loblollies are a favorite of the lumber industry because they grow very, very straight and very tall. And he said the ones that were there were actually quite tall, because most of the time they're cut down before they get that tall. So all the ones like around my neighborhood are older, because they haven't been cut down for lumber, and most of them are left as part of the environment. And he talked about there's actually a layer inside all the layers of the hard layers of bark on the outside that some native tribes, like further north here, they will actually eat the wood pulp. It is edible. If you don't have anything else to eat, it's edible. And of course there's pine nuts, but these pine trees really don't they really don't have big pine nuts in them. They're pretty small. And what else about the pines? He talked about pine tag tea, pine needle tea. And I asked him about that, and I said, well, what's the best way to prepare it? And he said, you don't boil it, and you don't use boiling water on it, because that will make it release the terpenes, basically what you get where turpentine comes from. So he said you boil your water, and then you let it cool, and then a little bit, probably like the same way you would do for green tea. And then you pour it on and you leave it there for like 10 minutes or something like that. And he says it's not going to have a really strong pine taste, but you will still get the vitamin C and all that. And I guess loblollies have 3 needles per bract, and he says loblollies, it's L-O-B, so that's how you know it's got 3. And then white pines actually have 5, that's W-H-I-T-E, so 5 needles, so we learned that. He talked about dogwoods and how actually there is some kind of blight or something that's affecting, or fungus, something that's affecting the dogwoods here. Mine are still okay. He talked about pink dogwoods. Now I have this big pink dogwood, which is actually quite old according to my tree guys. Apparently dogwoods don't usually get that big. And it's a pink one, but apparently the pink ones are diseased. They have a virus, and that's what makes them pink. So when they are sold, they are grafted onto a healthy rootstock of a white dogwood. I didn't know that. And there are little berries that you can eat on them. And some cultivated varieties of dogwood, this I knew, have bigger berries. What else did he talk about? He talked about some invasive species that aren't native to here, and one, I can't remember the name, it was like a Ishel something or other, not Ishtanga, I don't remember, I'll have to look it up and see if I can find it. Anyway, apparently it is the only source of quinine in the northern hemisphere. And he said that some herbalists believe that some invasive species, well, plants go where they are needed, and that, you know, malaria and dengue fever could potentially be becoming more widespread. Is it that tree? I don't remember, was that tree or another one that they call cat piss tree or something like that, because it smells really bad. He says whenever he was an arborist and whenever they would have to work on it, it was just pretty nasty to work on. Oh, tulip poplars. So I've got a big tulip poplar here on the side of the house. Tulip poplars are actually related to magnolias, which doesn't surprise me because I noticed that the blossoms that come from them do actually look like magnolias. And tulip poplar bark is used in basket making. And was it that? I think it was that one that the branches can get really hard if you cure them right, and they're used as a splitter for other woods. I'm not sure if it was that one or another one. But the thing that I thought was really interesting about the tulip poplar is that he says if you take a twig, and you chew on it, if you are in, he says if you're in a really dark, depressed, very run down sort of place, that if you chew on the twig, it can really brighten you up. But if you're feeling okay and you chew on the twig, it'll blister your mouth, which is like, I thought that was really fascinating. And he talked about oaks, white oaks, let me see, white oaks, and the white and red oaks are named so because of the color of the wood. And I believe the white oaks, their acorns will sprout, I mean the trees will sprout from the acorns as soon as they fall. But the red oaks, it takes like till the next season or a couple of seasons before they come up. And so if you see squirrels burying acorns, they're red oak acorns. And one of them has more tannins. I think it might be the red oak has more tannins than the white oak, but I can't remember which one was bigger. And probably a lot of you know that they have to be treated to be used, to be edible. And he said if you like break them up, crush them up, and tie them in a bag and leave them in a stream that's flowing, and you leave it overnight, that will remove the tannins. But the quick way to do it is to boil it. But it takes more than one boiling. You have to pour the water off. But he said a mistake that some people make is that they put cold water on them. After they've poured the other one off, they put cold water on them, and then that kind of seals the tannins in. And I guess what you need to do is have another pot of boiling water ready, so when you pour off the first one, you pour on the second one. And it's supposed to be very good for like muffins and that sort of thing. You can use the flour. We talked about hickories a little bit. Hickories are related to pecans. He didn't talk too much about hickories, I don't think. He talked about beech trees. And I've noticed that the beech trees here, I don't know if you've seen in any of my videos when I'm walking in the woods, there are still some trees that just have these kind of buff colored leaves hanging on them, and it almost looks like like the tree died and the leaves didn't fall. Well, apparently with beech trees, they don't start losing their leaves in the fall until they become able to reproduce, to produce fertile nuts. And that's like until they're 60 years old. They don't start actually reproducing until they're 60 years old. And then they'll start losing their leaves. And he said that one of the theories of why these trees do that is because, at least here on the East Coast, while there aren't a lot of forest fires because there's so much water and it's so humid, when forest fires do happen, it's spread by the leaves on the ground, the dry material. And so if the trees keep their leaves, the fire won't consume them, it won't go around them. Or it will go around them. It won't, come underneath them and burn them, so that they have a chance to grow to maturity. And he saw some other trees when we were walking around. It was just really interesting. That's kind of the condensed version. But it was, it was pretty cool. He was a very interesting guy. There was a couple that was along for the walk that they do mushroom hunting, and they were talking about finding morels under, I can't remember what kind of tree, the drip line of some kinds of trees. And that, oh yeah, that was the other thing about the roots go like way out. They go like way out beyond the drip line of the trees, especially when they're in forest, because there is kind of no drip line. There is no canopy of just one tree. It's a whole forest. So yeah, that was cool. I was talking to his wife a little bit. They actually have they call it a botanical sanctuary on their property. They've got like 3 acres up in the mountains, and they have a lot of wild ginseng and bloodroot and things like that growing there. I'd like to go visit it. I just don't have $1,500 to spend to apprentice at anything, but it would be neat to see. I would love to have a class, and I mentioned this to my counselor because she's the one who knows these guys, that it would be neat to have a class for people who live in the city, who live in urban forest, and want to have a natural environment in the backyard, more of an actual woodland environment that has native, useful plants, which is what I'm trying to do. I don't know if any of those roots that I bought last year and planted are going to come up or not. So far I'm not seeing anything, but it's definitely not spring yet, so we'll see. I hope they do. I really wanted to grow that Solomon seal. But so that's it. that's that is that class, and I start my encaustic class on on Wednesday, and I think I'm going to try and get on the mat tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. Gotta find my gi. And I think that's all for now. Very gloomy day here. No rain and just gloomy. I was kind of a little bit in a funk earlier, but we had a long walk. We went and walked along the river. And now it's the evening. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. I found there's a neat series on Netflix called Cooked. And I think it's just like a 4-part series. And it's based on the book by Michael Pollan, which I found because I realized after I was watching it that, oh, wait a minute, I know this. I got the book and I never read it. I got it at the time when I was, let's see, it was at the time when I still wasn't sure what I was going to be doing, and I was still living in El Cerrito, but I went to the book release. It was at St. George's Spirits in Alameda, but I'll read you what it says in this. It says, in Cooked, Michael Pollan explores the previous uncharted territory of his own kitchen. Here he discovers the enduring power of the 4 classical elements, fire, water, air, and earth, to transform the stuff of nature into delicious things to eat and drink. Apprenticing himself to a succession of culinary masters, Pollan learns how to grill with fire, cook with liquid, bake bread, and ferment everything from cheese to beer. In the course of his journey, he discovers that the cook occupies a special place in the world, standing squarely between nature and culture. Both realms are transformed by cooking, and so in the process is the cook. Each section of Cooked tracks Pollan's effort to master a single classic recipe using one of the 4 elements. A North Carolina barbecue pit master tutors him in the primal magic of fire. A Japanese-trained cook schools him in the art of braising. A celebrated baker teaches him how air transforms grain and water into a fragrant loaf of bread. And finally, several mad genius fermentos, a tribe that includes brewers, cheesemakers, and all kinds of picklers, reveal how fungi and bacteria can perform the most amazing alchemies of all. The reader learns alongside Pollan, but the lessons move beyond the practical to become an investigation of how cooking involves us in a web of social and ecological relationships with plants and animals, the soil, farmers, and our history and culture, and, of course, the people our cooking nourishes and delights. Cooking, above all, connects us. So I've watched the first 2 episodes, and that was really neat. And now I'm going to start, and I'm going to watch the other 2 as well. I don't know if I'll watch them tonight or what, but I'm definitely going to start reading the book. So that's it. That's all for now. I hope you're all doing well, and we'll talk to you soon.